Hey, y'all, I'm Andréa.
And I'm Christopher.
And we are two friends who love each other and who think it's so important to talk about race here in America and elsewhere when appropriate.
Because you never know, right?
You never
So,
know.
so how you doing today?
I'm doing so well. I'm good. It's always great. It's a blessing and a pleasure to be with you. So I'm good.
I feel the same way. My weave is tight and I'm feeling all right.
You are so funny. So today, y'all, we are going to talk about dun, 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 white privilege. But our approach is, I'm not going to say it's slightly different than the approach that's out there because neither Christopher or I, we've said it before, we are not scholars. This is not what we do full time. There are scholars who study this, who know this, back and forth, up and down. And so we're sharing from our experience, but we're going to talk about white privilege and really how it can be an advantage, or not how it can be, but how it really is an advantage. And not only that, but how to use your white privilege to advance humanity.
Well, and I would add how to even be aware of it in the first place, because one of the most horrible problems with white privilege is that it's like asking a fish swimming in water what water is.
That is so true, Christopher.
And, my entire life, I wasn't aware of it until I myself started spending time in countries like China and South Africa and other places where I was in the minority. and I felt unsafe and I felt different, and people were treating me differently because I had different melanin content in my skin and things like that. And what I learned from that experience was, after I could get through my discomfort and rest into it, what a blessing to experience the richness of other cultures and other ways of thinking, and how much that's made my life so much better as a result of it. But it takes people in many different ways a lot of momentum and energy to get over that hump, to realize, oh, wait a sec, everything I was born with is not necessarily what everyone else in our society enjoys or has. Yeah. So you got to cure that blindness in one way or another. And maybe we can talk about ways to do that.
No, actually, I would love for you to just really spend some time with white privilege, because you're right. A lot of white people don't understand what it is because, first of all, when we think about privilege, most of us, well, I guess not in 2021 because, white privilege is now the term is mainstream, but previously, when we think of the word privilege itself, we think of like money and riches and houses, you know what I mean? Like those who have like a lot of things. So for some white people, especially those who are, let's say, born in a trailer park to extremely poor parents, or to strung out parents, drug addicted, alcohol addicted parents, to those white people, they're like, privilege where? So I'm glad that you brought that up. And I really do want us to spend just a little bit of time of talking about that. And I think it's important to really know like how to identify it, because not everybody is going to have your experience where they will be able to go to other countries, first of all, because that in and of itself is a privilege, not necessarily white privilege, but it's a privilege, to travel to other countries and all of that, right? So not everyone is going to have that opportunity to do that and be face to face with their own privilege. So I would love to talk about like how to identify it, how to sit with it, and how to like get over that hump. Because obviously I can't talk about white privilege from that perspective.
Well, I believe you understand it probably more than a lot of people do. But so for me, it was really it started with breaking through some of the myths that I was taught as a child. Because, we went through this in episode 2. I looked around me, I saw white people everywhere in places of power. We have this myth that America is a meritocracy where anyone can gain access to any position through hard work and being smart. And it's a question of willpower as opposed to skin power. right? And so it took me a while to realize that that wasn't true,
Yeah.
because people would keep bringing up counterexamples. Like, look at Condoleezza Rice, look at Colin Powell, look at all these Black people who succeeded. It must be because they work so hard and because other people aren't working that hard,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But when you start to see scientific studies about putting two identical resumes on a table, one has a Black sounding name, one has a white sounding name, even though the content is equal, there's always a preference for the white one.
Yep.
And so there's these kinds of, even if they're, more implicit bias issues than conscious racism, it's still part of the mechanism and the system that keeps people of color oppressed in this country and sustains the myth of white supremacy and the system of white supremacy.
Ooh, you're preaching, Christopher. Come on.
Yeah, I don't preach your style, but I preach my style, right?
Yes. I wouldn't expect anything less.
I grew up in the United Church of Christ, and we don't holler, we don't scream, we don't praise Jesus. We're a little bit quieter than that. So I'm going to show my Midwestern roots. There's nothing else I can do about it.
Well, I'm from the Midwest too, but
Yeah, exactly.
Different experiences.
Well, and that highlights another point, is clearly the way you express yourself through your culture is different than the way I express myself through my culture. There is absolutely not one damn thing wrong or bad about that fact.
Exactly.
But the fact that I can express myself in a white way opens doors for me, gives me privilege. If I'm on the phone with someone and they hear me and they assume I'm Caucasian, there's a good chance that they might treat me differently than someone who calls them up and is identifiable as a person of color or has a Hispanic accent or has an Indian accent or whatever the case may be. And that's just all the realities of white privilege. And then we're just barely scratching the surface.
Yes, that's amazing. Yes, so right. You're so right.
So how do we become conscious of that? Obviously, I think the right place to start is having conversations among ourselves as white people about this topic, with those we love, with those we trust, who we can have this conversation with. And I've said it a million times. The only way to really understand the real experience of African-American people and other people of color in this country is to let go of our assumptions, to build real, authentic relationships like you and I have, where I can sit in respect and openness and listen to your truth about what you've experienced in your life. And then how stupid and cold-hearted would I have to be to say, the experience that you just recounted to me isn't real. I don't believe it. It's a myth, because in my country, which is a good country, and in me, because I'm a good person, we're not racist, right? Because racist is bad. I'm good. This country's good. Therefore, we can't be racist. So we have to get over that hump. We have to go out and we have to get the data. And the best way to get the data is through authentic, real relationship with people who have experiences that are different than ours.
Yeah. Wow. That's so good. And you know what? You're so right. Because, oftentimes when there's a seminar or something on like race and racism, a lot of times what I've noticed in my experience, and I know this is not true everywhere, but we see that it's always a Black person or a brown person or a person of color sharing their experience of racism, right, in this country. And while I think that's powerful, what I think is more powerful is for them to see a white person sharing their experience of being racist, whether consciously or unconsciously, and recognizing, similar to what you just shared with us, like, wait a minute, this is not the experience for everyone, right? Like, wait a minute, it's not just that if you work hard, then you'll be successful, because let's be real, the people who are working at McDonald's, well, some of them don't really work hard, but I know when I worked at McDonald's, when I was younger, I worked my butt off. But guess what? I still made the same, and again, I was blessed because back then when I was 16, 17, I made $7.25 working at McDonald's, but who could deny all of this? You can't. You can't.
No, no, girl.
But it was back then, but I worked my butt off. So it's not just that if you work hard, then you'll be successful, because there are a lot of people who are working in factories working hard and they're not successful.
Right. And there are a lot of white people who are working really hard and aren't successful or can't get above a certain ceiling
Yeah.
because there's prejudice there as well
Yeah.
about poverty, about
Yes.
language, about
Yes.
history, about
Yes.
not having access to generational wealth, and all
Yes.
those other things that white privilege brings for a lot of people. And it's ironic to me how those people then go off on the Black Lives Matters movement and apply a lot of these white myths, saying, well, I work hard and I don't want anyone, living off my tax money because they're lazy and staying at home. I know plenty of white folk who fall into that category.
Right.
Right? So
We all do.
let's not even go there. But all of us, whether we're LGBTQ or whether we're people of color or whether we're people living in poverty or whatever the case may be, we shouldn't be eating our own.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be fighting each other and blaming each other for our problems.
Yeah.
We need to band together and support each other and build each other up. That's a mentality I just cannot understand. Because if there's one thing that the gay experience has taught me, it's to be compassionate for other people who are oppressed.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people like that. And unfortunately, not all of them, but
Right.
how, if you're a person who's been oppressed, can you not then develop compassion and support for other people who are oppressed? Think, it takes someone who's very damaged to not be able to do something like that.
Yeah. So, Christopher, what about the people who are, people who are listening to this and they're saying, okay, first of all, I don't have the opportunity to travel to other countries, so I'm not going to be exposed to being the minority in a country. Secondly, well, the way that you're so woke, if you will, is because you're a gay man. And so you've been oppressed and, like all of that. What do you say to that person who is cisgender, they're straight, white male, whatever? Like, what do you say to them about white privilege and how to really identify it and sit with it? Do you understand my question?
Yes, I do. So I'm going to talk directly to the camera.
Yes.
To Karen and Ken.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah, no, but seriously.
Yeah.
I understand that this is invisible to you.
Yeah.
And I understand that it's difficult to believe in things that you haven't experienced. Mm. Therefore, the only logical thing that you can possibly do is go out and do the work to read and speak to people and watch the 1 million YouTube videos on this topic, which are easy to find.
Yes.
To start to open your mind and your heart to other people's reality. Yeah. It doesn't mean that people want to take away what you have today. Mm-hmm. Okay? Doesn't mean people are coming to get you.
Right.
It means that you have one perspective in life, like most of us do, that is maybe very different than other people's perspectives. And you can enrich and broaden your horizons in your life by trying to understand other people's experiences. And you do that by asking a question, shutting up, listening, and processing what's being said, and trusting and believing other people's experience at face value without bringing up a whole lot of objections like, but Colin Powell, but Condoleezza Rice, but NBA stars, but NFL stars, right? And you've got to start to deconstruct some of those myths that you might have, that white privilege isn't real, that implicit bias isn't real, that microaggressions aren't harmful, things like this, so that you can really put yourself in another person's shoes and understand their perspective. It's not going to make you less of who you are. It's not going to take away anything you have. It's just going to make you better.
Yes. Yes. I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Christopher. Because while you're talking, it just came to me. It's like, well, what about, like you said, the Ken and the Karen, who like it's not been their experience. And, it is easy for us to discount something, if we haven't experienced it, it's easy. I think that's human nature. It's like, well, I haven't experienced it, therefore it's not real. But it's important to respect other people when they share their stories with you, because trust me, as a Black woman, I wish that I could say that all the stories of racism and discrimination and prejudice that I've experienced, I wish they were made up, right? Like, I wish that I didn't have the mental scars. I wish that I didn't have the emotional scars. I wish that I didn't have the physical scars, to prove that this is my experience. But when someone shares something with you, believe them, and even if it seems far-fetched for you, for your experience, just sit with it for a minute. And if we're all honest with ourselves, all of us have experienced situations where we've been kind of like called out, or we've been treated less than, even if you are a straight white male in this country, I'm sure there's an experience that you've had where you're like, I kind of feel slighted, although racism is more than feeling slighted, but still. So, I want to share an experience on how I had a friend who used her privilege. And this is a small experience, but at least it's somewhere to start for people to learn like how to use their white privilege for the greater good. So like, Christopher, I'm a runner. I've completed 3 marathons. I'm currently training for my 4th one. Although with COVID, I don't know if I feel comfortable running out there. We'll see. Still got about 2 months. But
just be first.
Right. Well, then that's not going to happen. So I'm a runner. And, when I first started running back in 2012, I didn't know any other like Black runners. Did Black runners exist? Of course they did. But I live in Wisconsin. It's a segregated state. Like Milwaukee is one of the most segregated cities in the United States. So, and I lived in the suburbs, really the only Black family in probably like a 5-mile radius, but whatever. So I didn't really know a lot of like Black runners. Now I know a ton of them, but in 2012, I didn't know many. So my run group, the group of people that I ran with, they were mostly white. There were a few Black people, Black women that I ran with, but I forgot my water bottle out. We were doing a long run and it was in the summer, and that's really dangerous. And I think we were doing maybe 10, 12 miles, but it was really hot and I forgot my water bottle. And of course I'm running. And this time I was only Black person, and we're running and we go down by the lakefront, and there's this organization. I don't remember what it was, but they were setting up they were doing like a run, right? And so I didn't have any water. And so my white friend saw that, well, they're setting up for a run station. First she was like, Andrea, why don't you go ask them for water? And I looked at her and I was like, she was like, okay, whatever. So she walked over there to them and she said, you know what? My friend forgot her water at home. Do you mind giving her, can she have a water bottle? They were like, oh, sure, no problem. And they gave it to her. Now, I don't know what would have happened if I would have gone up to this particular group, right? Because I didn't. So I can't say either way. But based on my past experience, if I would have gone up to them as a Black woman, asking them for water, again, based on my past experience, I don't know what would have happened then. I would have gotten looked at and they would have told me, no, this is for the registrants of our race or whatever. But she walked up there as a white woman and was like, hey, my friend, she doesn't have water. Oh, sure, no problem. And they gladly gave it to her, right? That was my friend using her privilege for the greater good. And she didn't stand there and argue with me and say, oh, Andrea, you're being silly. Oh, Andrea, you don't know. Oh, Andrea, just go and see what would happen. When I gave her that look, she was like, say less, say no more. And she walked up there and she got the water for me. The point is, that was her using her privilege. And that's how, as small as that was, that's how people can begin to use their privilege for the greater good, not discounting someone when they share their story. Or if you are in, well, nobody's really out shopping in close proximity anymore, but let's say you're out and you notice something suspicious, like you notice, because yes, Black people do still get followed in stores. For all of y'all who think that that's a thing of the past, it is not. It still happens. Although when I'm followed in stores, I don't shop that store anymore because that's just me, a person of integrity. But anyway, if you notice this, if you peep this behavior, then just kindly say something like, hey, I notice, you're following this person. Is there a reason why? And you don't even have to be loud. You can like quietly go up to the person and say, excuse me, I notice, if I'm wrong, forgive me, but I noticed this, I noticed that, and you can say something. It's the whole thing that if you see something, say something. Otherwise, if you say nothing, then you are complicit and you are contributing to the systems that are already in place.
Yeah, and I live most of my life in corporate America. And so the way that I'm trying to use my privilege these days is in decisions that we make in the company. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, I had a reporter come to me the other day and say, we'd like to interview 2 people in your company who moved here from Switzerland. Mm-hmm. I'd like to talk to you because I know a little bit about your story and it's really interesting. And can you find someone else for me to speak to as well? And my immediate thought at that point went to who was the most well-spoken representative of the company, because that's my job, is to create that image. And then I thought, hey, wait a second, that doesn't have to be the criteria. Another important criteria is also, are we making choices that represent the diversity of our company in putting people forward, not only for something like this, but also for leadership positions, for promotions, for things like that? Are we working? We had someone say, oh, we can't find enough highly qualified Black engineers. And that, don't worry, everyone in the room went off. Said, are you kidding with the quality of graduates that are coming out of our state universities, let alone the HBCUs and things like that? We can find people. And then we realized that part of that success in attracting candidates is by portraying the diversity of who we are as a company to them to make them feel welcome. Because what I get from your story is that you have real historical wounds that lead you to believe that people are going to dehumanize you in something as simple as asking for a bottle of water, right? That breaks my heart. And so, you are taking the responsibility for doing the work to heal yourself, which is a beautiful process to watch.
Oh, yeah.
And at the same time, we as people who enjoy white privilege need to use that privilege for good and make sure that we are keeping an eye out for our brothers and sisters who are suffering or who are in need, and that we are giving them, that we're helping to change their mindset by letting them know they are valued, they're loved, they're represented in the images that we create about our society. And had I been someone at that water table and I'd seen you running by, I'd be like, hey girl, where's your water? You want one?
Right.
That's where we need to get to.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Is propping each other up. You're doing your work.
Yeah.
We need to do our work as a compassionate, equal society and as white people to reach out to people of color and let them know, hey, you're my sister. I love you.
Right. Yeah. No, it's important for us to really recognize that, like, Christopher, if I were to cut myself and if you were to cut yourself, we would both bleed red blood, right? I mean, it's like everything, we have the same organs. You know, obviously some people, they lose them, you know, all that. We're not talking about that, but we have, you know, we have the same organs and the same systems that helps me to live. Like, you have those same systems. And so it's like, to think that, you know, to think that someone is less than, and actually we got to stop saying less than, right? Because then we're still putting the onus on the people who are oppressed. To think that someone is more than, look up at the white people, because that's where the privilege is to me, it just represents, and I'm just going to say it, a sense of superiority and internalized hate on a different level when you become conscious of where you are, right? Because a fish doesn't know that it's in water, right? But today, 2021, to me, there are no excuses to not know what white privilege is. To me, there are no excuses to not know what racism is. To me, there are no excuses to not know what implicit bias is. To me, there are not any excuses that anyone can use to not know what a microaggression is, right? And so we get to a place where it's a conscious choice to remain as you are and not change.
So, you know, I agree with you. But I also look out into the world and I see the people that we're dealing with who have a scarcity mentality about the universe. They believe
it's still a choice.
They believe it is, but it's a hard barrier to break through. I believe as human beings, it's our absolute responsibility to do so. But I think we need to continue to do the work that you and I are doing, that many other people are doing in this area, to bring this struggle to light so that more and more people join the movement for decency and equality and humanity. Because there's a lot of people right now who, not making excuses for them, but they don't see it. They just don't.
Because they're making the choice. Right. I mean, like I said, that still doesn't negate the fact that they are not making the choice. It is still a choice at the end of the day. I agree with you. There are people who don't see it. They're making the choice not to see it because it really, truly is all around them. Yep, especially in America. There is absolutely no way in America people can feel that way, Christopher. And I am standing on that. Do people believe that in their hearts? I'm sure they do, but it's because they're making a choice. There is no way, especially after the incidents of what happened on January 6, 2021, there is no excuse. There is none whatsoever, because this is, not only was it a national issue, but this was an international event.
Yeah, and you've seen a lot of hearts and minds change and flip sort of based on that. And that's great, because anytime you illustrate the ugliness and people see it, they're like, oh, damn, you know, that's not who I want to be. Right. And that in that sense, it's a good thing from in the long arc of history. Mm-hmm. You know, hopefully this will be an inflection point where people start to realize, oh, that's right, one of the ways that white privilege manifests itself. Yep. But, you know, there's a lot of people out there like me who, with the exception of a little bit at work, I live in the suburbs. Vast majority of folks who I work with are white. The church I go to is almost 100% white. I live in that world. And that's what makes
but you have access to the internet, and so do everybody you work with, true. Christopher. There's the thing about it is there is not a lack of exposure. What you're speaking to is exposure. Okay, I live in the suburbs. I work around white people, blah, 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 blah. Get that, been there, done that, wrote the book, had the t-shirt, sold it, made $1 million from it, all of that. But we live in a 24-hour news cycle. We can go to the Google machine. Y'all out there, go to the Google machine who live in white communities and work around white people. Go to your Google machine and Google white privilege, right? So no excuses, though.
So I agree with everything you're saying, and that I believe that people of goodwill and open heart should be doing that and must be doing that. No way whatsoever that shouldn't be happening right now. What I know about the reality of the way many people choose to live their lives today is that they encapsulate themselves in a bubble of people who think the same way they do, look the same way they do, and act the same way they
Right.
do.
That's why I said it's a choice. We're saying the same thing.
Yeah, I know.
We're saying the exact same thing.
We just say it differently.
Yeah. We are saying the exact same thing that people are choosing. I said it's a choice.
Yeah.
You just said people choose to encapsulate themselves. What we agree.
Yeah.
We agree, sir. Yeah. We agree, Queen.
But I think it's important to highlight the fact that there are a lot of people who are making that choice, and we've seen the damage that choice creates.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So if they were to say of us, what, you guys are also encapsulating yourselves in a bubble of multiculturalism and liberalness and progressiveness. My question would be, and what harm are we doing with that?
Right. Exactly. Right. What's the harm in that? We know that, and scientific studies show that diversity is what creates the advancement. The person who started the COVID vaccine is a Black woman. Had that woman not been where she was at the time that she was, who knows how long it would have taken. Yes, would a vaccine still have been created? 100% it would have. But this woman said on January 11th of 2020, when she realized how deadly COVID was, she went to her laboratory and started working on a cure for it, right? A vaccine for it. So we know, studies have shown, science proves that diversity, not just diversity of race, but diversity of thought, diversity of gender, diversity of idea, diversity of ethnicity, like diversity, even in the climate, right? Like plants, diversity in plant life, diversity in the animal kingdom. Diversity is what enriches our lives. And so you can say that, okay, I'm filling myself with multiculturalism and all of that and diversity. Yes, but like you said, what harm is that? But on the flip side of that, filling yourself or being surrounded by only white people and white privilege is what will get what happened on January 6th.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's the danger.
There is absolutely that danger. And so the question for us becomes, how do we pop those bubbles and help people broaden their perspectives on the world? Hopefully you and I are doing just a minuscule part of that with our conversations, but it's up to everyone listening to go out. And I know you're sick of the crazy people in your family. And I know you might have written some of them off and unfriended them, or maybe even blocked them on Facebook, because Lord knows I have. But, then I sit back and wonder, should I have done that? Should I not still be modeling for other people what it's like to try and be a compassionate, open-minded human being who embraces that diversity that, for living in 4 different countries, has made my life so incredibly rich.
Yeah, but you also shouldn't accept abuse. Like, some people are, no matter how compassionate you are towards them, no matter how well or soft-spoken you are with them, they'll still say you're an idiot and you're a liberal lover pedophile, right? Like, let's just be, there are some people who are just gonna say that, right? And so you still have to protect your space and you have to protect your energy. And there are some people who, in the moment, they need to be cut off. Now, does that mean that you have to forever leave them cut off? No. I mean, it's again, it's your choice to do so. So there are some people where you do need to cut off and stop talking to, but then there are some people where you just kind of okay, let me see what's going on. Maybe they're open to change and you work your way in that way. But some people need to be cut off. That's just my opinion and my
experience. And the other way I've dealt with that is to try to find points of commonality.
Yep.
With them. So with this neighbor that I was talking about, which, I'm having to openly talk about because what I have to say is compassionate and loving, we had this major disagreement about racism in America. It went on for 2 years, involved a lot of alcohol. 2 hours, I should say, not 2 years. And at the end of the day, I say, hey, I know that you really love your country and you want to believe that it's good and that it's equal and that it's, compassionate to all its citizens. The only thing I can do is to urge you to open your mind and listen to Black and brown voices.
Right.
And listen to them express why that might not be true for them.
Right.
Doesn't make it less true for you,
Mm-mm.
but at least then you've broadened your perspective in a way that has integrity, honesty, and compassion with it. Yeah. So, and maybe that's never going to happen. Maybe it will. But, I didn't invalidate him as a human being. I acknowledged the fact that most of his arguments are based around the fact that he loves his country and he believes it's good. Mm-hmm. Which that's not an argument that you're ever going to win. Mm-mm. To convince somebody that it's not. And I might not even want to do that actually at all. But I might want to get him or anybody else to realize that was not a universal experience for me growing up gay.
Right.
That's not a universal experience for people of color.
Right.
That's not a universal experience for people living in poverty.
Right.
That's not a universal experience for women.
Right.
In this country, even in 2021. So
right.
Open your mind. It does not make you any less of a person to do so.
Yes. And with that, we just want to thank y'all so much for listening and just encourage you to, have those conversations about white privilege. Do your research. Don't just listen to us, right? And then think you've learned, because again, we're speaking from our limited experience. So do your own research, follow Black authors who talk about white privilege, follow white authors who have done their own anti-racism work. If a white author has not done anti-racism work, do not follow them. But if they've done the work, follow them and take their lead. Do your own research and then, have these conversations. Because if you don't, it's like the person with the stronger opinion really pretty much wins the conversation. And so if you don't have all of your facts straight, you can say something and then they'll come back with, let's say, a stronger or perceived stronger response. Then you'll be like, oh, okay, well, never doing that again. So it's important for you to really, do your own research.
Yeah, and you're right. This is a fight not in the way that happened on January 6th, but rather a fight in the way of, people come at me. They, they bring their racist A game.
Yep.
And I have to center.
Yes.
be calm. I may not respect what they say, but I have to remain respectful of them as a human being.
Yep.
And then only that can create a bridge.
Yep.
But it's hard work.
Yeah, it is.
It's got to be a calling for you, for me, for everybody, because the only other opportunity or the only other potential outcome, if we don't do the work, is the stuff that we saw on January 6th. Yeah. So we got to do the work and keep the conversation going.
Yes. So thank y'all for listening. We'll see y'all later.
See you next time.